Good afternoon. Welcome back to United TV. We're going to be looking at what was breaking news this morning. Since then, we've had a bit of time to actually look into the Van de Ven story, see what's happening. I suppose, a lot up in the air with Spurs, and a lot up in the air with potentially other players now being linked from Spurs to Manchester United. We saw Romero's been linked. I think people aren't very keen on that. We've seen Pedro Porro linked as well. And a lot of people looking at if Spurs get relegated, there's obviously going to be a lot of players looking to move. Maybe the little bit of a difference in this situation is if Spurs actually stay in the Premier League, then Van de Ven still wants to leave Spurs. So this is something that doesn't matter whether Spurs get relegated, it doesn't matter if Spurs stay in the Premier League or if Spurs start improving. Micky van de Ven has pretty much made his decision. This is his last season at Spurs. So that seems to be what I've read just recently. It looks like this is why, whether Manchester United can get Van de Ven or not, or whether Manchester United actually want to move for Van de Ven, it looks like Van de Ven is actually going to be leaving Spurs. So if Manchester United do want to get him, this is going to be the time. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, whether Manchester United actually consider this a good move. So this is one where there's a poll in the chat. You can vote if you're live. You can vote whether you think Manchester United should make a move for him. It'll be difficult to guess how much it's going to cost. I wouldn't really believe the valuations you see. There will just be every single player is going to have a high number at the moment, but realistically, if Spurs get relegated, they might have to look at cashing in on a few players. If Van de Ven wants to leave, almost inevitably, when a player wants to leave your club, you're probably going to have to sell them. Otherwise, things tend to go quite badly wrong. So I'd imagine that Spurs will be mindful that Micky van der Ven does have did have a high price tag associated with him, but I think that's definitely going to be weakened a bit with the stance that Micky van der Ven is going to start pushing for a move. So that's probably good news if you want Micky van der Ven. Just a quick kind of like to comparison, Manchester United's defensive situation at the moment. A lot of people at United do see Aiden Heaven and Yoro as the long-term future. They're putting they're kind of comparing Saliba and Gabriel as maybe like the go-to of like defensive partnerships at the moment. And I suppose over the course of the season, particularly at the start of the season, Gabriel and Saliba will probably the standard in terms of like not conceding goals and actually being pretty solid defensively. But that was years in the making. So that took a few years to get to that point. Saliba was like out, and there was like lots of things at the start of his career, but gradually they've established themselves as the first the first team back pairing and maybe one of the best in the Premier League. So that's the future. The question really is going to be, what do Manchester United do until they get to that point? If Aiden Heaven and Yoro are the future in, I don't know, but maybe 2 years' time, if we're looking at when they're like 22, 23, and maybe they're going to be maybe they're going to be gradually playing more and more games. Yoro's played a lot of games. Aiden Heaven not so much at the moment. I think next season's a bit too soon to see them playing every single game and starting games. At the moment, Aiden Heaven's on about 20 games, so we're going to see gradually things go from there. So this is kind of the starting point in terms of like Aiden Heaven and Yoro's career are really. I think with Aiden Heaven, just to go back to the slide, I think Aiden Heaven's career is really starting to take off at the moment. Yoro's kind of had like a little like one or two bumps in the road, but again, it's like the Premier League is tough, and he will learn and he will improve. But this is kind of what Manchester United hope. They hope that's the future. The question is going to be in the next 1 to 2 years. Until that's the case, it might not be the case. It might be that one of them makes it, and Manchester United needs someone to play alongside them. What do people think regarding Van der Ven as a potential option? I know there's going to be a lot of opinions, so that's why for maybe the first part of the show, we'll have a look and see what people think. Is it dependent on price? Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. Welcome, DJ. Good to see you. Good to see you in the chat. And it's been a while. It's been a while, and we're pretty active at the moment. We're doing a few streams per day. Please share the streams if you can. The Discord, we're pretty active as well. If you've got questions about the channel, I can answer those in the Discord. But no, looking at the Van der Ven situation, it was kind of like a yes/no question. Should Manchester United go in for him, and what do people think? I do think it's going to be one where it's going to be a bit of a judgment call regarding that one. So Jim in the comments says he's going to be injury prone as soon as we get him, and so you're probably not so keen on him. Welcome, Ryan. I know you were quite keen. People are quite keen. Just to give like a different version of this. Clearly, Manchester United at the moment are seriously considering this. And this is something that Manchester United, this is not like, I don't think this is like that immediate. I don't think this is like suddenly a reaction to Spurs' situation. I think Manchester United have been looking at this for a while. And if you look at Manchester United looking at players, they've been looking for a while for a big, imposing, experienced left-footed centre back. It looks like they've been looking for a while for probably a replacement for Lissandro Martinez, and they thought Branthwaite would be that player maybe about 12 months ago, 18 months ago. That story just went pretty quiet. I think Everton wanted too much money. So this is why I'm thinking it might be another one. I think Branthwaite's actually picked up an injury recently, so maybe there's a reason for that. Everton also aren't going to, they're not going to budge from their transfer expectations as well. So it's going to be pretty difficult to do a deal for that one. So Mark says it depends on the price, and Bilal's saying he doesn't think it's good. No, for me, it probably depends on the price. That's why I was saying that I think Branthwaite was going to be Everton. As far as I know, Everton wanted 70, 75 million for Branthwaite. And United are looking for that sort of profile. I mean, Van der Ven, they're looking for someone a bit pacier, like pretty pacey. I suppose you'd probably have to say, based on this season, a lot of people looking at Spurs, pretty terrible, like pretty terrible. But how much do you blame individual players? There's clearly some of the players have given up, particularly for certain managers. Maybe they put a bit more effort in the last game, but got a bit unlucky. But clearly with Spurs, Romero, like I said, Pedro Porro, there's maybe one or two players in that club where people might be looking to try and sign him. But they're saying regarding, so we have got good defenders. The injury issue and the availability is probably the problem, isn't it? That is probably the issue at the moment. That Aiden Heaven and Yoro just have a bit of inexperience, and thought, well, I suppose that's just something that happens when you buy, say, 19 and 20-year-olds. But it's very difficult to kind of say, no, thank you, DJ. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Cody says you wouldn't sign him at all. And Cody says, I don't think the price matters. So you've got Van der Ven. What's happening? I think Van der Ven's looking to leave. He's like really looking to leave. So that's the angle here. That I know Liverpool are seriously interested as well. Liverpool thought they were going to get Mark Gahey, and so what I would think is that given what Liverpool have done, recently, they thought Mark Gahey was going to be a Liverpool player. Man City stepped in. I think United are thinking the same sort of thing. Maybe it depends on how much money they were prepared to pay for Branthwaite. One thing that might be a factor is that there's going to be new rules coming in regarding football finance, and it's going to be that you can only spend a certain percentage of your turnover on the salaries. And Wirtz was getting a huge salary. There's a lot of Liverpool players on way, way more money than Manchester United. If Manchester United are looking to sign some premium players, and Laurie Whitwell was saying earlier today on The Athletic, they're going to get at least four major signings. So by major, you've got to think big salary, big transfer fee. Manchester United's wage bill, probably at the moment, because it's so low, it does mean that we've got lots of scope to actually sign players that are going to be on reasonable salaries. Whereas possibly some of the teams near the top of the league, I believe Chelsea might be potentially having a problem. Liverpool and Man City have the highest wage bills in the Premier League, so potentially they're going to be less able to match the sort of transfers that if you consider like Manchester City have already been moving players on that were on very high salaries like Kevin De Bruyne, so then they could get Semenyo, they could get Mark Gahey on a big salary as well. Liverpool have just signed a huge amount of players on huge salaries, huge transfer fees for Isak, big money being thrown at Wirtz. I think possibly it means that Manchester United, I don't know what Van der Ven's salary would be, but I'm just saying it might make it a bit easier for Manchester United. I don't think we're going to pay insane sort of salary. We are going to pay certainly market value though. But I think the situation has been that the De Ligt and Martinez injury situation has kind of like thrown a bit of a spanner in the works because I thought Manchester United, I thought they got things right. So if you look at the defensive situation at the club, I think United were actually quite well positioned. I was thinking that they thought we had De Ligt and Martinez as reliable options. So then Maguire would go, we'd see Evans and we'd see Lindelof leave. I think Manchester United thought that we've actually got that centre backs for the next few years. and that's what we're hoping. We've got centre backs sorted out, and then we can gradually replace them with Aiden Heaven and with Yoro. And what we've seen is, unfortunately, Lissandro Martinez over the last 18 months, big injury issues. They also delayed to something that we couldn't have foreseen. I don't think any. I think a lot of us thought that there might be some injury issues with Delit. I don't think anyone predicted that it would be quite this bad. And it's kind of like forced the hand a little bit, isn't it? So now it feels a bit like United need to go for a centre back. If you don't think Van der Ven is the best option, then you've probably got to look at it and say, what options are there that you think would be quite good? Cody says Liverpool lost their edge in the transfer market. Then they seem to be really struggling. They've been trying to replace Salah for I don't know about 2 years. They tried to get Van Dijk replacements for a long time, or at least get some depth in the squad. So and Liverpool paid very, very big money for Isak and Wirtz and overpaid for those players, I think. So they paid too much money. So United were lucky that Brentford was priced out of our reach. He gets hamstring injury after hamstring injury. No, this is one where I think this is never going to happen now, is it? So Everton got greedy. They wanted too much money. This is why I think I'd be saying if you're going to spend big money on Van der Ven, and again, I don't know how much it's going to cost, but the fact he may be forcing his way out of Spurs might depend on his contract situation. I think when I saw this story several months ago, I thought it was going to be, yeah, I thought it was like a story that was like his price would be too much. So I was thinking, I don't think Van der Ven would be the player Manchester United go for. Maybe things have changed a little bit. Maybe I think there could be like a better deal to go for that. That could be the stance regarding this one. But at the moment, just interestingly, because I've got a poll running, which is pretty independent, I'm not going to try and say I think it's a good or bad deal at the moment, just to see what people's reaction is. At the moment, slightly more positive in the poll. There's 57% of people are saying they would go from it at the moment. I know for a fact that there's definitely a few people. Welcome everything, Carpy. Is this Connor? I could be wrong, but say Van der Ven bad cost. It's cost Spurs a lot this season. So positioning is so bad. I think with this, I watched Van der Ven play, and I think I caught a bad game. But one thing that was bizarre was that Van der Ven was actually quite good in terms of attacking. Like he was good in terms of like as an attacking option. He's got a lot of pace. He is one of the quicker defenders in the Premier League. And I think a lot of people say that sometimes with Van der Ven, he doesn't read the game as well as you want him to, and he can use his pace to recover. So it's one of these, it's one of these situations that sometimes with inexperienced players, you can see that they might not read the game particularly well. They might make some mistakes. Positional errors might creep into the game, but they have the recovery pace to get round it. And I remember sat in the Stretford end watching Manchester United play with Rio Ferdinand. Now, at the time, Rio Ferdinand, I don't think you consider him the quickest player, but his reading of the game was exceptional and his positioning was spot on. And whenever Manchester United run the threat, it was like he didn't have to sprint into positions. He didn't have to make last ditch recovery tackles because his positioning was so good. And he also had alongside him, it was a really good partner, a Vidic, very physical, aggressive defender that would do the opposite kind of maybe different things to Rio Ferdinand. I'm just wondering with this one, like Spurs have been dreadful most of the season. Romero's been a walking red card next to Van der Ven. You'll be seeing like defensive collapses, goalkeeping mistakes. That there's been a lot of reasons why Spurs are bad. I'm not saying it's all Van der Ven. I'm not making excuses because Van der Ven is definitely a factor. What I'm saying is, I think there are some mitigating circumstances sometimes. Sometimes you look at the game and think that I remember watching this game. This is the most bizarre game I think I saw where Van der Ven, I think he scored a goal and then made a defensive error and Spurs drew the game. And I was thinking that I think Van der Ven does seem to be, if you want a defender to be more attacking and pacier, then Van der Ven could be your guy. If you're looking at, and maybe, okay, maybe this is a different situation as well, because if you think about Manchester United, and if you imagine how our team's going to look next season, so also cheers V, appreciate that other earlier comment. I was going to say, if you look at Manchester United next season, and this is going to be a situation where consider the whole team, consider how the team's going to look with Van der Ven in it. The idea is going to be that Manchester United will not be backs to the wall, hanging on in matches like Spurs are today. So when you have a team that's playing really badly, every single player is going to look worse. If Spurs have got no foothold in the game, if you look at Chelsea as well, when the strikers score no goals and the midfield gets put under more pressure, the defense is under more pressure because the team's playing badly. And I think that's sometimes a combination with Manchester United that our defense looked worse last season. And when our defense actually looked quite shaky at the start of the season as well, with a poor goalkeeper and with a midfield that was organised badly. If you look at, say Manchester United, if we got Anderson or Tonali, or we got some like Tchouameni, or if we got an elite centre back, so a central defensive midfielder, we get a defensive midfielder that can do a fantastic job in midfield, it's going to take the pressure off defence. And if you're looking at Manchester United being progressive and being on the ball, then Van der Ven could be actually a better situation. So again, that's we're talking about this as a news story, and we're just trying to like make some sort of mitigating factors. But I would agree with like when I spoke to a Nottingham Forest fan, Murillo is the player they rate Murillo as high as Anderson at Nottingham Forest, and I think he would be a similar sort of price, not a similar sort of price, but I think he would be also pretty expensive. Like Murillo would be probably the most expensive centre back Manchester United would be looking at when we consider Senesi is available on the free. Van Hecke might be 35, 40 million. You could look at probably Slotterback might be the same sort of price. So you have all these different options. And Van der Ven would be a premium price. I'm pretty sure about that. Spurs would be looking to try and any sort of team that's relegated will still have a there might be a reduction. And to be honest, actually, I don't know the situation at Spurs. Do you think Spurs are going to have a lot of players on relegation contracts in terms of like if West Ham go down, Fernandez is 34 million, no brainer. If West Ham get relegated, we should be going right. Get Gfin. If West Ham get relegated, get Gfin. Put in some great crosses. He would be great to have. Put him at left back. Let him like ping the ball to Benjamin Sesko. I think he's a really good option. I have no idea how much he would cost, but with a relegation situation, I think West Ham have got players on like a sensible kind of release clause type price. So I think 34 for Fernandez is outrageous, isn't it? Get that done, get that done straight away. But I think if unless anyone knows otherwise, I think Van der Ven is he like about 25? Is he about that sort of age? I think we're looking at someone like a decent, like a few years experience. I think that's going to be similar. I think that's roughly his age. If people got some, um, if I'm wrong, I think it's kind of close, but I think he's about 25. I think that's what United are essentially looking. Like I said at the very start of the stream, I think United are looking at the situation where they go. So for people that just tuned in, that Manchester United look at their centre backs and go, right, Yoro and Aiden Heaven will be our first choice options. Maybe like not next season, but maybe the season after. But potentially they do need to also look at over the next probably I don't know 18 months, 2 years. You might be looking now and thinking, actually, they probably need to consider that they're going to have to move on a centre back. So this season, considering that the Litz, we don't know when he's going to come back, and Lissandro Martinez actually isn't injured at the moment, but each injury he gets does seem to be particularly lengthy, sidelined. So, but quite, no, he's actually had a good season as well. Again, that's what I mean. There are a lot of good options out there. So when we're talking about this one, and we're looking at the situation about the transfers, is that Manchester United. The story is that they're considering an offer. So that's why I think when you're looking at it, they're considering an offer for Van der Ven. That's why I've got a poll in the chat saying, do you think that Van der Ven's a good option? I was thinking this might be like a 50-50 type thing, like a 50-50 type situation. Mark's saying we can't just buy youth. We need players that are ready now. And I agree that in terms of this one, um, no, in the end, it didn't work out. That there was issues, but I will try and get people back on. I think it's like the messages and things didn't go through very effectively. So everything Carpy says shows how much of a joke this board is. They're clueless. My question is going to be for everything Carpy, who would you go for? Like this is the point that I'm not here saying Manchester United should sign Van der Ven. Far from it. I don't think Van der Ven would be my top option, but I think it's good that Man United are looking at centre back because I think most people discussing football at the moment. I think most people looking at our team think you need some experience. That's what I'm saying. So the story is that Man United are considering a move for Van der Ven, but I think also maybe about I don't know 2 or 3 weeks ago, Murillo at Nottingham Forest was a story. Van Hecke at Brighton's been a story. I think Slotterback's been a story as well. So I think United are looking at a few different centre backs. The key thing at the moment is going to be they're looking for experience. Then welcome, Chris, to the chat. Interesting, Chris. I know Ryan's quite positive. My kind of like response, kind of for some balance in terms of what people think, like for some balance. If you're in favour what is interesting, if you're in favour of Van der Ben, then let me know what your reasons are. Because at the moment there is a poll running, so this is like a complete, like complete open vote. Should we sign him? 61% of people at the moment are saying yes. So that's why I'm saying if you think it's a good reason, just post some reasons. Because I do see more negative reasons in the chat, but the silent majority at the moment is like winning by 60-40. So in terms of like one from Spurs, you look at yeah, I think with Spurs, there's a lot of people I'd say like attacking wise, I don't think we need that. I think midfield wise, I think there's better options out there. I think maybe defensively, even though Spurs have struggled, I think there's a couple of names that people do consider. I mean, there was a story about a week ago that Manchester United were looking at Romero, and I think Romero got red carded that exact same day. So I was honestly thinking, yeah, maybe keep looking, maybe keep looking. Then Yanni said I would still try and steal Botman from Newcastle. I mean, there's options out there, isn't there? Like Senesi, I think is the option where I don't know what the deal with Botman is, what the contract situation is, but I think with Senesi he's available on a free. I don't think he's necessarily fantastic, but I think it would be like a bridge the gap type signing. A lot of this news is based on Manchester United feeling like they need to get some sort of like quality player in, but it's going to be quite a bit of a stopgap, isn't it? So the players we're signing at the moment, I think it is like I'll say this again. I think it's like a bridge the gap signing where if you've got Aiden Heaven and Yoro, with all the best will in the world, they could potentially be amazing players in 2 or 3 years' time. But a 19-year-old and a 20-year-old is not going to be Manchester United's first team options all of next season. I think Aiden Heaven, I would say, if you're looking at Van der Ven, it's the same as looking at Harry Maguire. It's the same as looking at Sandro Martinez. You got have one experienced player in that team. Can you imagine playing against I don't know Real Madrid or Barcelona, and it's Aiden Heaven and Yoro's first Champions League game? It's like you need to have some experience in there as well. I mean, Van der Ven has obviously played Champions League football. It's the same as the midfield options. Tchouameni and Tonali and other players have played a lot of European football. But no, for positives, I think it's just people will have different reactions as well. I think one of the things that's very interesting is there's a couple of teams that everybody will judge Spurs based on the whole team being bad. And I think even like last season, Manchester United were terrible. Don't get me wrong, but there were still like one or two players that actually did okay. I mean, and you could look at the teams near the top of the league and say even the teams near the top of the league, there's still a couple of players who are actually having not great seasons. So if Manchester United finished third, for example, you could still look at the team. You'd have to say if you finish third in the Premier League, there's a lot of things you've done right over the Premier League season, but there would be players you think do need to be moved on have been poor, and that's true. And the same way as if Spurs get relegated, if West Ham get relegated, I think every single person watching would go, Juve and Fernandez are good signings. Get these players in, they're good signings. And I think if Nottingham Forest got relegated, I think nearly everybody would say, get Murillo, get Anderson, and they would still be quite expensive. Like if they get relegated, Murillo is a player that Nottingham Forest fans rate very highly. Some fans here obviously rate pretty highly as well. But again, it's people can have different opinions on this. I think that for me, the factor is I think you definitely need. I think you definitely need to look at it and go, right, well, United do need a centre back. So if I did a yeah, if I did a question like this, if I did a question and said like, should Manchester United sign a centre back? I think it's going to be like 90% plus people in the chat. I think we're just disagreeing with which one we go for. I'd say I think the Branthwaite situation. I think Branthwaite actually got quite a bad injury. I think it's like a recurring injury issue. So I don't think I don't think the Branthwaite story. Yeah, you can like yeah, comments and suggestions always welcome. You can go for that one. Of says Delit is not coming back. So do you think it like I don't know what to say about Delit. Do you know what the concern about Delit is? There seems to be like a media blackout that when I've seen like people talking about the lit occasionally, I haven't seen anything at all in the main in any sort of media. It's making me think of Malasia and that something bad's happened in terms of like whether the injury issue is more serious than we think. There was a story maybe like a month ago saying would he play in the World Cup, and there's been nothing since. So I don't know. It looks pretty bad. This is probably one of those situations where I don't think Manchester United wanted to go for a centre back this summer. And I think Manchester United, all the news was all the different midfield targets we're looking at, and we've been following that. I think most of us watching that watch, say, this channel or other football channels or lots of other things along that line, and lots of people talking about it, saying like, no, who's people want Baliba or Anderson or all this different midfield chat. And I think the most like the last couple of months, because these transfers will have been planned for so long. I think the last couple of months with De Ligt being missing, it's almost like forced Manchester United into actually revisiting the centre back market, maybe a year earlier than they wanted to. It's maybe forced them into they've re-signed Maguire. I'm not sure they were actually thinking of doing that maybe at Christmas time. I think they were definitely something they consider, but they had Lissandro Martinez coming back. They had Delit playing, and I think since then it's really difficult, isn't it? It's really difficult. So, welcome Arcade to the chat, saying the Bass is another option. I wonder whether Man United might be a bit reluctant with sporting players. I just think at the moment that it looks like United are actually looking at, say, Lewis Hall from Newcastle. It looks like United are predominantly looking in the Premier League, and if they're going to go for one centre back, I get the feeling that the key thing with the centre back is going to be experience. That seems to be like whatever centre back you're looking at. If you find a centre back that's like 18, 19, 20, 21, I don't think he'd be under consideration. I think he's almost certainly got to have played in the Premier League for one or two seasons. He's almost certainly got to have played top flight for a top European team with European football. Champions League experience would be ideal, but I get the feeling that that's kind of the criteria. So I know there's like loads of names suggested, and I think the obvious ones are like Murillo, they are Van der Ven, they are some like Slotterback. These are the options, and I think Van Hecker's actually had a good season as well. He's kind of in the mix, and Van Hecker might actually be one of the one of the more cost-effective signings if he is about 35, 40 million. But it might be that it's not a good idea to try and get one of Brighton's better centre backs when you're also trying to negotiate for Belieber. I don't know. Maybe this will be one of those stories where do you remember if you remember the De Ligt and Mazraoui deal, maybe there'll be like a double deal for like Van Dijk, so for Van Hecker and Belieber if we can get the price down. I don't know. I'm not sure. So let me go. I'll go for the comments. I'll try and keep up to date with some of the comments as well. It says we don't know why we're not looking in the championship. I think it's because I'm not sure whether Manchester United look at the players' situation at the moment. I think what they're looking at is if they bought a player from the Championship, would they be, how far along would they be on from Aiden Heaven and Yoro? So, and I think United wants somebody that's going to be instantly walking in the first team as someone that's already played at that level. Like the Aiden Heaven and Yoro situation, I think that determines that Manchester United want to go for experience. Like experience is going to be the key thing here and something that you need. Like I think Maguire would have been let go if De Ligt had had a completely different season and been available for most matches. I think De Ligt was supposed to be Maguire's replacement, and I think that they just got Now, either they didn't check him out properly, or there's an injury issue they didn't weren't aware of, or whatever the scenario is, it's not worked out, and it means Man United probably have to sign an extra player that they didn't really budget for. But now, unfortunately, these things happen, and you have to try and do that one. Welcome, Gaz. You're saying no. What's your reasoning? I mean, looking at Spurs season, you could probably pick a lot of reasons. So no, I'm thinking that with that one, that it's fine. And it's just because the chat at the moment, the voting poll at the bottom is still in favour, and it's interesting that the majority of the comments are not quite so positive. Say Senesi's on 50k per week. Bournemouth not willing to increase it to match. Evan Nielsen on 85, Clive at 80 a week. So Spurs are offering 65. If United want him, 100k a week seals the deal. Yeah, so see, also Spurs are looking at some of the players we're looking at. And I think when we're looking at midfielders, I think Spurs are also looking to replace maybe some of their players with cheaper deals. So, I mean, I think Spurs are actually absolutely like fine financially, but maybe a drop to the championship will hit that quite a lot. So it will damage their model somewhat. Though bit bizarre having a Champions League team getting relegated though, because that's they were in that competition this season. And so yeah, if United won him 100k a week seals the deal. I can't remember what Maguire was on, but I believe like wasn't Lindelof on about 160 and barely played. Evans might have been on like 70 or 80, not playing loads of games. So no, I think this one, like, if you're looking at like I know there's no such thing as a completely free deal. You know, there will be some sort of fees to pay, but it's probably not the worst deal, is it? I think Senesi is the deal you do if you literally run out of money. If United go very big on other aspects of the transfer window, then that's probably what you do. So yeah, I think with Senesi situation, I know Murillo's like people prefer him, and I know there's a lot of people that prefer Van der Ven. Then if Manchester United spend huge amounts of money on midfield and do go quite big on a left winger, which they seem to be looking at doing, and maybe if they go for a left back as well, then I think most people would probably go. I don't. You'd probably be happy that if they'd spent the money and on the more pressing aspects of the team. But I think Senesi would still be like someone that's. I think Senesi is a good average midfielder, so a good average centre back in the Premier League. Like I wouldn't be expecting crazy stuff, but I'd be expecting an experienced defender that does have some weaknesses, but has been like overall quite decent. It's not that risky, is it? And it wouldn't be too bad. I would be not putting on too long a contract 'cause I think he would kind of quite quickly move into like the Lindelof Evans backup role as soon as like other players are as soon as Aiden Heaven and Euro improve. But it's not the worst situation. Yeah, I'm not sure about about the lit. To be honest, I'll probably leave it until we actually see any sort of information about that. But no, not great, not great. No, I tagged you on Twitter, Rob. It's like I said, YouTube doesn't send out notifications, so I think nine. I'll just try and stick to like 9 a.m., 1 p.m., and then like so probably about 8ish p.m. So, but no, YouTube doesn't send out notifications. It's useless, isn't it? Who's being a hater about Maguire? I didn't see any of the comments that saying keeping Maguire was no. I would say keeping Maguire was like almost. I think keeping Maguire just had to be done because there was no other replacements, was there? There was no that. If you think about it, that Manchester United when Carrick took over, De Ligt's not been available. Lissandro Martinez hasn't been actually very good. I think Maguire's there because Maguire's going to be a good mentor for Aiden Heaven and Yoro. I think that's what he's there for, and I think United kind of panicked a bit thought like Maguire's going to be, he's better than Lindelof and better than Evans were in their last year, a couple of years at Manchester United. So I think Maguire's there as an experienced figure in the team. It's going to be definitely someone that's going to help them develop. I just think what you're looking at is Maguire's there in the very very short term. I think United are looking at actually a bit of say Maguire's the best centre back at the clubs as whatever. No, I think Maguire's definitely been one that's it's kind of like necessary because Manchester United don't know if they're going to be getting Van der Ven. They don't know if they're going to be getting um, someone like Murillo. We don't 100% know how much the midfield is going to cost. And I think if the midfield rebuild spirals out of control, I think United have honestly they've decided to go for major signings rather than mediocre signings. Well, at least that's what they're saying. If that's the case, then I think the amount of money spent on midfield will be significant, and that might be why they looked at it and thought, actually, we need to keep Maguire for 1 year or so, and then maybe see what happens. If you keep him for 1 year, I don't think it's a bad move. Like I can't remember what his salary is. It's like 120. So you're looking at like 100K would a week is 5 million per season. So if you look at if it's going to be costing 6 million or so or 7 million to keep Maguire, then to be honest, if Manchester United did a loan deal for Mathis Tell, that would cost you about 6 million euros for the sort of 6 months. So keeping Maguire is cheap. It doesn't cost much money. And the worst case scenario is, I mean, if Harry Maguire's not in the team because other people are playing better, it's no, it's not much at all, is it? So would City or Real Madrid keep Maguire? Um, I know City fans are talking about who is it? Like they kept Kevin De Bruyne when he could barely walk around the pitch, I suppose, and he got 400K a week. John Stones is going to eventually leave, but he's been like playing about I don't know about a third of the games. I think it's difficult to compare. All I'll say, Gaz, is that Manchester City were well run for a long time. Not quite so much recently. Real Madrid have been run well, like very well for a long time. The difficulty is going to be Manchester United. If you take a snapshot, Manchester United had so many problems that if we're in a situation that I'm going to say this about Maguire and about players that you kind of extend the contracts for. If Manchester United are doing the same thing in 3 or 4 years' time, it's a big problem. Okay, so if Manchester United, say we go forward like 4 or 5 years' time in the future, and if Manchester United are looking at, say, like Mbeumo, if he's like 32, or if like players you think need to be replaced, if we're doing it then, I think it's no, it shows that we haven't progressed as a team. But unfortunately, when Manchester United have made mistakes for ages, the problem's going to be that it takes time to get these things right. I think if Manchester United had been run better 5 years ago, we wouldn't have this issue, would we? So it's difficult to look at the situation that's in now and compare it to Real Madrid. Real Madrid spent years lifting the Champions League with an elite team, and Man City have been the best team for years. It's a little bit like if you think of when Man United were a top team and Man City were trying to claw their way up, Man City probably had to keep a lot of average players for a few years because they couldn't afford to replace everybody in one window. It took Man City about 3 years to go from having wealthy owners to being actually a significant threat, and it's taken a long time. And I think with United, it's going to take a long time to get back to where we need. And say if Maguire's got a physicality which maybe only Aiden Heaven has actually got. Saying Yoram Martinez, worst you've seen. So yeah, I would say Yoram Martinez. Lissandro Martinez has been a bit disappointing. That's probably the problem, isn't it? Um, now, I saw a comment actually regarding some of this as well, saying losing both Casemiro and Maguire in one window is terms of like this is something that you need around the pitch. If you're looking at say for example, if you're looking at the whole squad, if you got someone like a Dominic Calvert-Lewin in your squad, when you're running defensive drills and when you're training, you've got someone that can like really work the defenders. I think that's something we don't really have for a while. So United don't really have certain players in the club, but we do have someone like Maguire that I think the good thing about Maguire is if you've got defenders like Sesko in the club, then you've got someone like Maguire that can actually be a difficult opposition for him in training sessions. And it's like you need to have like these player profiles in the club. It's going to take a bit of time. I think United have got a really bad balance at the moment in the squad. What we've actually got is most of the experienced players are leaving, and we seem to be replacing them with players that are going to be better players in the future. So you kind of the reason why we spent decent money on Cunha and Mbeumo was because we didn't have any experience up front. Like we tried Garnacho, like Garnacho, Almajalo plus Rasmus was maybe the worst front three attacking players we've ever seen in terms of goals. And if you put Xerxes in there as well, I don't think anyone was getting close to double figures, were they? And it was completely useless in comparison with normally attacking teams. And I think that's what we need. Like Casemiro, like the leadership Casemiro's got, I think is a bit underrated. But in terms of like, if you look at what's happening on the pitch, you see someone like Maguire with Aiden Heaven, and you see that kind of understanding being pushed out. And I think what you see is that with someone like Bruno Fernandes, he's kind of helping Sesko, he's helping Dorgu develop. And if you look at further back, Casemiro was certainly, you can see the relationship and understanding between Casemiro and Kobe Mainu actually improving. I think when you put Maguire in the team next to Lenny Yoro or next to Aiden Heaven, you saw that improvement as well. So I think if you throw just nothing but youngsters into the team, you get what's happening at Chelsea, a team which lacks leadership, lacks fight when things get difficult. And I'm not surprised that Chelsea folded like a pack of cards when they got a pretty inept manager in because they didn't have any leadership in the team. And when they had no leadership in the team and pretty poor leadership at the top, it was really difficult. I think if you get leaders in the team, they're going to sort out a lot of the problems on the pitch, regardless of head coach. And I think United are looking at trying to do this in the centre back position. I think if you lost Casemiro, can you imagine if you lost Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, and Maguire? You're effectively losing the leadership of the team. It is tricky. I say, what's Maguire teaching them? I'll say with Maguire, you can see Maguire actually teaching like a bit more positional sense. Aiden Heaven, first game was pretty much kind of he was going too far forward. He was out of position. I think he got caught out in the Bournemouth game. And I think you see with Casemiro, Casemiro has a good understanding what to do in terms of this one as well. And Genghis says Bruno Cunha and Buemo experienced international players, and say we're not short of experience with. I say we like this one. When you say we're not short of experience, I think what we are saying though is there's only one centre back with experience that we think is going to be available, or at least that Lissandro Martinez injuries and form is quite questionable at the moment. I mean, I said this about 2 years ago. I thought Lissandro Martinez, his form was a bit erratic, and I don't think it was particularly great. The thing that's different is going to be, and this is going to be really key. If you watch Manchester City playing some big European games, like really big European games this season, if you watch the first game that Semenyo and Mark Gahey played, they were incredibly like they were in terms of Premier League experience. People go up. Mark Gahey should play for Liverpool. Semenyo walks into every team. When they played Real Madrid, I think it was Real Madrid they were playing. They looked mediocre and they were a little bit rabbit in the headlights. They will get there, but it's just going to take a bit of time. Even experienced Premier League players, sometimes the step up to massive European games is going to be, is going to be interesting. So it's kind of something you do need. But again, I'm saying it's going to be quite short option, so a sort of short-term option. Genghis like brings up Senesi as well. So Senesi on a free is a quality option. That's kind of your cheapest option I've seen out there that I think is going to be, say, worth going for. So they're quite better than Mike Gahey is a good shout. How much would he cost? I mean, that's if it's a no. I have heard a few people talk about him. I don't know whether he's going to be necessarily that. So Chelsea are a team of individuals. Exactly. I think United have actually started looking at the player profile rather than the individual player as well and how they're going to fit into the team. But yeah, Chelsea, disaster, aren't they? Absolute disaster. Now, I was looking through, like, Kate made a couple of comments I was going to try and put on the screen if I could find them. But this was it in terms of when Manchester United had the class of 92, they did have, I'm trying to think actually who they had. They had Brian Robson in there. They had Bruce. They had Pallister. They had Mark Hughes. You had Eric Cantona. I mean, the list goes on. Like you have, and I think United's team just before Manchester United brought through the class of '92, you had a midfield of Ince and Roy Keane, and it was probably the best midfield in the Premier League. Like the 1994 double winning team was probably one of the best Man United teams that people don't really talk about. So they had solid options. Peter Schmeichel, and I can't remember who the defenders were. I think you had Dennis Irwin, maybe Paul Parker, but you had the centre backs were good. It was pretty much an experienced first team. Everybody was everybody was a serial winner, to be honest, at that point in time. So you had leadership across the pitch. Eric Cantona was there, Mark Hughes. I mean, if you think about it, it was pretty much a team that everybody had been playing high level Premier League football for a few years. I don't think there was any inexperience in the team in say 1995, 96. When you're talking about the class 92 coming through. I don't think there was any inexperience. Even one of the youngest players like Giggs and Sharp, they had loads of experience. So yeah, I think I did say Brian Robson. Like Brian Robson was there as well, wasn't he? Cheers, V. So no, Brian Robson. The point I'm trying to make is that so people forget how good Ince was up there with Keane and Vieira for me. Yeah, I remember. Okay, this is one for people that are a bit older, but I remember when Paul Ince signed for Manchester United. He was like what a player we thought great. He was immense for West Ham. I think West Ham destroyed Liverpool the year before, and Paul Ince was outstanding. And Paul Ince was a top quality player. But again, people will judge him on what happened after. But at the time, the Paul Ince and Roy Keane midfield was pretty phenomenal. I mean, that double winning team could have been like with like different rules in Europe, it could have been like one even more. But the thing was, Manchester United actually kicked on by getting that blend right. They had the experience to start with, and then you get the youth in. But it's not. I think United at the moment have almost got like not enough experience, so it's really really difficult. Mike says Yoro can learn from Maguire from the aerials on balls and corners, and say, yeah, maybe with Yoro that's probably the weakness in Yoro's game, and I've seen a lot of examples at the moment. I'm not sure with Yoro that I think he's one that if you're in possession, Yoro's actually pretty effective, but if you're not in possession, Yoro's got a lot to learn, and it's quite difficult for him. So, and I say maybe like Van der Ben, when you're in possession, like Van der Ben's pacey. I think a lot of people do like him, but he does divide opinion a lot. I will agree with that. Afternoon, Tyrone. Good to see you in the chat, my friend. Hope all is good. So experience isn't everything. It says youth and hunger, desire. I say we're not short on experience with Bruno Cunha. And say Scott last night played like a veteran high IQ player. I think with this one, I was being like really, really specific with experience in defence. So the question that's probably the point I'm making with experience was going to be like very specific to the centre back position. So I do agree that in terms of like what we've done is if you remember last transfer window, we did bring in those players, didn't we? Like Cunha was a signing and Buemo and Bruno was already there. So we got the experience in the attack. The question is going to be like, who are the role models, who are the leaders, and who are the mentors in the team for these two players? Like, I'm not going to say that they're going to be the next Gabriel and William Saliba. I mean, hopefully we play more entertaining football than those guys do. But in terms of a physical presence, you say that Arsenal have been probably the best defensive team this season in the Premier League. If they do win the title, and it's kind of 50-50, but I believe Man City might play Bournemouth, so that's one where there's still maybe a twist or turn. There's no guarantee City win all their games, but you never know what's going to happen. I think Arsenal have got actually quite an easy run in, but again, they could bottle it. You never know. But looking at this, if you want to get those two players to the level of Gabriel and Saliba, that I don't think Lissandro Martinez is going to be the guy to take them there. I don't think De Ligt's going to necessarily be playing much football. Harry Maguire was kind of debatable whether people wanted him to stay, but in the short term, he does need to stay. I think because United don't have any options. The question is going to be, I suppose, is like, should United actually consider it? So yeah, again, yeah, it's just like I've got my view on experience, and I would like to see a bit more experience because I really want to see that. I think the younger players, I want to see them do well, I want to see them succeed, but I think they need more experience alongside them over, particularly for what is like a long season. It's like we're not talking about just the Premier League; we're just talking about European football, and I think European football I think it requires more experienced players. Like Casemiro, if you remember, like the football we were playing in Europa League, and maybe some of the Champions League might be similar, but the football we were playing in the European competitions last year, Casemiro was probably our best player. Like it's not necessarily going to be as fast as the Premier League, but I think you've got to have some experience in terms of like what to expect, how to manage certain game situations. And Casemiro went from being a player that even when we weren't playing well in the Premier League, Casemiro probably stepped up, and his European experience definitely helped us. So that's why I was thinking that when it comes to Premier League football, like there's no doubt that Aiden Heaven and Yoro have been like pretty good in a lot of games, but there's a long way to go. I think Aiden Heaven, in my opinion, will be. I think he might get to the. I think he might reach his ceiling a bit higher than Yoro. He just seems to be like some of the vulnerabilities Yoro's got that I don't know if he's worked on. I don't know if it's coaching or whether, for whatever reason, hasn't quite kind of kicked on in some aspects. I think aerially is definitely something I'm a bit concerned about. But sometimes the physical stuff of like when I see Dominic Calvert-Lewin in a lineup, my first reaction is right. We need someone alongside Yoro because you need someone that's going to be. It's almost like you need someone like Maguire or a physical presence to just deal with that sort of issue and not make it become a factor in the game. And I think that's the problem that United actually had. I say, oh, that's bad. That's bad. I'm probably like about 60 miles above you, Tyrone, and Arsenal fans are vocal, aren't they? I think with Arsenal fans, it's just that I don't know. It's hard to explain. If you know Arsenal fans, then you know you know, don't you? Um, say Goretzka might be available from Bayern, say 31, experienced, then that would be a good option for some of the things we're talking about. Would it be a good option in the Premier League? That I think United actually, when we're talking about players further forward, then maybe they're looking at more expensive signings. But no, I think with Goretzka, when we're talking about like Paulinho as well, I think United are not looking at players above a certain age. So I think what you're looking at in terms of United's strategy and the age thing is, I think we're I think with the age thing, Manchester United are a bit wary that if they sign players at a certain age, they will probably have to replace them in a few years' time. And we need a lot of, we need to do a lot of things over the next couple of years. So I think if we're signing players now, the idea is that they're going to be at least around for another 4 or 5 years, so that we can actually catch up with the rebuild and actually do that properly. I'm going to say not bothered about Champions League football. So I think the Champions League football. I think if you look at Newcastle and you look at Spurs and you look at, I think the Premier League. Like I think any Premier League team would actually not do too badly in the Champions League. But I think what you need is like, yeah, I don't think that Manchester United are going to be close to winning it at all. But I think what you need to do is make sure you get through your group stage. If you can get to the knockout stage, I think that should be the aim because Newcastle, they managed to do that, and we've seen other teams in Europe do absolutely fine, and they haven't been particularly amazing in the Premier League. I think what I'm thinking is that you kind of need, if you're looking at someone signing, say you sign an experienced player and they're going to play in the Champions League, then maybe also that means that they're not going to necessarily play the game after or the game before that in the Premier League. It's just about getting, if you're going to get some depth, I would rather go for someone with a bit of experience than go for somebody that lacks that because the Premier League is still going to be an important competition because you have to take it seriously. I mean, the aim is that the next Manchester United head coach, whether it's Carrick or somebody else, I don't think they're going to be able to finish mid-table and keep their job and do well in the Champions League. You've got to do a bit of both. Like you've got to make sure that you get through the competition as far as you can, put in some good performances, and then qualify for it again next season. So it's going to be difficult because it's going to be a big jump up from where we are. But I think that's why any player over 28 it seems to be a bit of a cut off. I don't think Man United would go for them, even if it might make sense to us, but I don't think they're going to look at it in terms of making sense to other people. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That I don't think there's necessarily uh, the age thing is definitely kind of to try and protect things in the very short term because I don't think they're going to think it's going to be worth it in 2 years' time to have these sort of deals done. At the moment, 64% of people have voted in the chat saying they think Van der Ven is a player we should go for. So that is interesting. I was thinking like 50-50 would be my guess, but so say it's a trade of balance and experience is needed, but for me, I'd love to see Scott, Mainu, and Belieber, etc., develop become something special. If you're looking at that, and I see you go for that midfield options, if you go like say you got Alex Scott, you got Kobe Mainu, you got Carlos Belieber, that's only signing two players, isn't it? So Manchester United could buy an experienced player alongside that to go in. And I think that if Man United went for Scott and Belieber and got no one else that's older, I would be genuinely surprised. I think whatever happens, if Man United don't sign a midfield player that's at least sort of mid 20s, I would probably I'd be quite surprised. I think they're looking for like not necessarily too many, but I think that too many links shows that Manchester United are valuing a player that's a bit more experienced. I think it's exactly like Cunha and Wemo. I think it's exactly like those sort of signings that United are trying to get. It's like Manchester United buying Roy Keane all those years ago. You buy someone that you know is going to be like an effective player. It's going to be great for a long time. And so you'd rather have yeah, maybe at some point, as we're doing more streams, maybe at some point we should have it might be something to talk about when I get some guests on. And for people that know Kieran, Kieran's going to be back on from next week a lot more. He's a lot more available. He was working as a journalist. I think he was covering a local team I know not far from where we live. He was covering their kind of journalists are sort of like putting out publications and putting out match reports, other sort of thing as well. But he was doing that in most evenings, so we're going to get him back on as well. So that'll be great to get a different voice as well. No, Kieran's a great guy, so quite excited about that. Bit of recruitment from myself behind the scenes. Yeah, João Gomez could be one that there's a lot of stories about João Gomez. Brighton, yeah, they do, Coyote. They just give you a valuation that's way too high and really, really annoying. So say when unsure on a player, just look at the other clubs after them. Like we're still got Real Madrid. Gordon, is it Bayern Munich after Gordon? Yeah, I'm kind of 50-50 on Gordon. I'm a bit put off by his attitude, but he's probably been one of he's probably been one of Newcastle's more effective players. I don't think Alanga's done anything at Newcastle, and I'm trying to think who else. I don't think Worcester's done a thing at all, has he? But there are big clubs wanting Van der Ven. And we are talking about Liverpool as being the one we have to battle with. Um, Also, I don't know if I said hi, Mike, but welcome to chat, Mike. And Mike says elite recruitment is key, but some fans have shiny new toy syndrome. Yeah, does Van der Ven? I think it's difficult with like the shiny new toy syndrome. I think with United, they definitely need to look at the squad and go, right, there's a few players that are definitely good enough. I was just thinking, in terms of defence, I think our defence is like, if Delit played every single game this season, I wouldn't even be having a conversation because I'd say, like, we've got Delit, we've got Maguire. And I think that with the midfield, effectively we need to replace Casemiro, we need to replace Ericsson. And if you're looking at those as being a couple of like recruitment issues, then we probably need to replace Sagate. It's quite difficult, isn't it? So realistic targets, then so yeah. My question be Genghis, like, what do you think then? If you're going to guess who Man United sign, what do you think? It's going to be it's going to be tricky, isn't it, to actually put out a suggestion there? Do you think like too many Anderson? I think it's already been talked about that Bruno Guimaraes isn't being discussed. I don't think there's any. I think they're talking about Tonali as being too difficult. I think United have actually got a reasonable amount of options. That I think Anderson is a target, but they don't think they're going to get Anderson. I think too many feels like Manchester United should just go, look, we don't know if you're going to re-sign with Real Madrid. Just decide if you're not going to sign with Real Madrid, we can actually then look at that. Saying is when we've got slight injury, it could be a factor. I don't know. Saying next season, I said I wanted a 5-year rebuild, so we're 1 year into it. So you want to be competitive in 4 years. that is a long term that's long term thinking, I guess, with that one. I think with United, I would be thinking that if I was going to make any sort of prediction, I think if next season, like this summer transfer window is an important one, like last year's was important as well. If United got, say, three midfield players signed, maybe one Premier League player, maybe a couple of other players that aren't going to cost as much, like maybe João Gomez, maybe Angela Stiller, maybe you're looking at Belieber, maybe you're looking at, say, Too Many or Wharton or whoever you think is going to be signed. If you get three players in that come in and make midfield good, if you look at then getting maybe a centre back, it doesn't have to be a very, very expensive centre back, but you look at that as well and you look at an attacking player. We said this morning actually the breakdown of prize money for getting to the Champions League football, the amount of money that Manchester United are bringing in for sales. There's just a lot. There's just a lot, isn't there? There's a lot of different. There's a lot of money coming into United, and things moving in the right direction. If you do that this window, and then maybe you look at trying to do one or two deals in January. Then when we start talking about, say, 2 years in the future, like you're talking about, say, a 4 year plan, when you start talking about 2 years in the future, there's a lot of players we signed, like a Roscoe, like a Leon, like we've got still Chido playing the under 21s, and we've got Kone. We've got a lot of players that we don't even talk about. And those players in 2 years' time, they might be coming in around the first team. So I think sometimes you can get this synergistic effect with the deals we're doing now, which are maybe players we see in 3 or 4 years' time, plus the players that are ready now that we do now, the next year, the year after. I think things will start clicking into gear a little bit quicker. So I think we're gonna that I think you need to look at some of the players you're getting that if you want to build for 4 years' time, whichever head coach we appoint next season, they're probably not around in 4 years. So I think you need to like speed things up a little bit. Like, do you think Liverpool thought, right, let's not buy any players. We won the league. Let's take it easy. Okay, ultimately it hasn't worked out for them, but they had to get players in because eventually, like Mo Salah's going to leave, Van Dijk's going to leave, like other players are leaving, and you have to get players in ready. So I think if United rebuild really slow, most players you sign, like 5 years later, are they part of your club anymore? I think a 5 year rebuild is like by the time 5 years has elapsed, I think the team's different. I think you've got a different team. So it's really difficult, really difficult. Let's have a look. So say 5 year plans. So you need to be ready in 1 to 2 years. I think 1 year is I think 1 year is too quick. I think people look at Arsenal. And if you're looking at Arsenal and how quickly did they rebuild, I think they went from being pretty rubbish in the Premier League to the next season they were in and around, say, were they like Champions League positions? And then a year later they were competitive to win the league. Like, I don't think you could say they've been competitive for a few years. If you're looking for a plan, and that's probably like Arsenal's probably the most recent team that went from being way off it for a big team to actually being very competitive in a shorter space of time. I think what Arsenal did was they built quite quickly through the youth. They got Saliba in as a younger player. They then bought quite wisely with Declan Rice. They bought more attacking players recently. And I think what they did was they gradually built over about 3 years. I think 3 years was the maximum amount of time from Arsenal being absolutely rubbish to being quite competitive. And I think at the moment, Manchester United are probably 1 year through that. And I think maybe what they're looking at is like next season, no one's going to be looking at trying to win the Premier League, are they? But if Manchester United can like should be genuinely like say if we're like locked in on third position again, I think then you can start looking at maybe next season we can be competitive. Like who would have thought that Liverpool wouldn't be competitive in the league this season? Like I think nobody. And like next season, if we finish above Liverpool and do like some good transfer deals, like why couldn't we finish above Liverpool another season? I think that no one even knows who's going to be in charge of Liverpool. So I think this is kind of my everyone's going to have a different view. I think from where we started a year ago, I think a 3 year plan is sensible. 1 year we kind of fixed the attack. This year we fixed the midfield. Next year we look at trying to gradually do that as well. Why we failed for 15 years? Underinvestment, really, really bad transfers we brought in. Like I think it's definitely a problem, isn't it? I think there's more than one reason, isn't there? We've got some of the worst owners in our football club, and that's probably part of the reason. So Chris says we need a full sale before we can do it. I mean, it's I think things are moving in the right direction. Yeah, a bit unlucky with Ekatike, really unlucky. But with Ekatike, so it's so easy to stop challenging within the year, so it should be possible to challenge for a title in a year. Things can change quickly. The example I would say regarding things changing quickly is, yeah, I would say on a personal note, it's a bit it's up no, it's a shame that Ekatike is not around. It's a bit like I remember when Nkunku like got an injury just before a World Cup. It's disappointing that you don't get the best players in the World Cup. But and he was probably one of the best signings. Like he was one of the best signings that Premier League teams made in terms of striker. Really, really disappointing. But that's one of the things that can happen. Unfortunately, I think the Delit situation with United might be something similar, where you go from having like a player you think you can have in the squad that's going to be reliable for matches, to suddenly they completely not in the question. And I'm starting to like think like it's like Malacia part two that we're just not going to be, yeah, not going to be worried about that one. Yeah, Ekatike was a good signing, but he was never going to be a Manchester United player, was he? Berber says, yeah, maybe the issue with the situation at United was that we had we had different head coaches, but one thing we did have was that we didn't really have a plan, did we? We bought a few players for a manager. We let managers probably have too much control. We probably let academy players go that shouldn't have gone, and all these factors. So it's a combination of like bad transfer fees, like Alvaro Fernandez, and you look at who was the other player? Garner. And you look at players that leave in the club that shouldn't have left the club, and you look at Manchester United signing players we shouldn't have signed. It's like if you make mistakes, then it's going to be very difficult, isn't it? Because Manchester City were taking the opposite approach. They were just spending cash every single window, like probably breaking all the rules. And yeah, that's probably one of the reasons why. Cody says, I think we're still cleaning out some of we're still moving on some of the players from if you make a bad transfer signing, look at Chelsea. Chelsea might have players at their club. They would like to move on. Those players might well be under 6, 7 year contracts. And I said this about 2 years ago, putting all your players on very long term contracts, at some point, can you imagine if Manchester United had put Sancho on an 8 year contract or Garnacho on an 8 year contract? And who signed Agate? Is that who made the decision to sign Agate? There's definitely something a bit suspicious with Agate. And one of the suspicious things about Agate is the super agent involved with Mendes. There's definitely something behind that deal that I don't know. I don't know what the real. There's definitely it's benefited somebody, but it hasn't benefited Manchester United. So there's definitely something along that lines. But Agate's being pushed to Newcastle. Apparently, I don't know whether Mendes is involved again, and whether it's almost like would Newcastle take this is something like a bit that people have been talking about behind the scenes. Is it possible that Agate, where he goes, then you've got other players that are managed by or represented by Mendes that will be like so? Yeah, I don't think Newcastle will buy him, but again, no, big up to you, Yarli. It's good to see you, and we'll catch up later on. Say Chelsea could go bust. I mean, Chelsea have got a situation where they can't really sell. They can't. They force players out of the club that are on 7 year contracts. That Chelsea have got a situation which could spiral out of control a little bit because United can move on players quite badly sometimes, but we do get those players. We do get those players eventually out of the club. But no, Chelsea are kind of stockpiling issues for them. So I don't know. Part of me hopes that I mean, I don't really care what happens with Chelsea, but I think some of the things Chelsea have done for me, I think are a bit unethical. They've regularly broken the rules. They buy loads of players, loan them out. They pay backhanders to agents. So Chelsea break all the rules, and it's been well published. They actually admitted it as well. And so I don't. I think Chelsea needs to be punished a lot more than they do because they don't contribute much towards football, do they? They're not. They haven't been a force in the Premier League for a long time. And so with this one, yeah, I think Mendes. That I think one of these things is like I think with Mendes. you got you have to do a deal with Mendes to get another deal done. So if Newcastle have a player they definitely want that's that has Mendes as the representative, then it might be that Agate goes somewhere surprising because then another top player goes. So I didn't know was Euro actually represented by Mendes, but anyway, there's definitely links behind the scenes that people don't really realize about. Welcome Lumpy to the chat. Says I agree. Say, yeah. I'll avoid talking about ex-managers for now. Say Bournemouth 4-4. Say Carrick wouldn't be in third without Ruben Amorim, and say, okay, you're saying Ruben's hated despite having an injury crisis. I think Ruben was like probably. I don't think it was going to be a long. I think the reason why Amorim left was an issue between him and the hierarchy at the club. That fans weren't happy with a lot of things, but I think there was a breakdown in. Like, I think what Ruben Amorim wanted to do next season and the season after would not have matched. So again, I think the club was making progress. Like despite Ruben Amorim and the results, I think Manchester United were making progress as a football club gradually because they signed better players. And even though the football wasn't great to watch, we were in fifth place rather than 15th. But again, I think it was going to be, definitely something like this one. I was saying anyone we would take from Chelsea. I don't know, with like Caicedo. Do you look at Caicedo and think Caicedo is obviously a player that people talk about as being really good, but I watched Chelsea recently and they're quite poor. So I don't know. I think Caicedo might be one of these players that I don't see Chelsea actually improving or hitting another level. That they got no. Have they got any good defenders that you take? I mean, Cucurella's good, but Cucurella I just find annoying. So I don't know. I might have a different view if he was in my club, but I personally is a bit annoying. I think the midfield's where you'd look at. To be honest, I would say Estevao, João Pedro. Like João Pedro has been in very good form this season. Actually, as I say that, I just checked the comments after I said it and said I'd take João Pedro. Yeah, João Pedro is probably the name that jumps out at the moment. Like we dodged a bullet. I sent something to people. I can share the clip, but I don't want to send it. I don't want to say it out on live stream. But there was a clip I saw with two very well known Manchester United content creators discussing the Liam Delap potential deal that was being talked about last season. It's absolutely hilarious what they think Liam Delap's going to achieve this season. So I did share that with a couple of people. I can send it to you if you follow me on social media. I can send it to you, but I don't really want to mention certain channels' names. Cody says I'd take João Pedro. Estevao, what's his salary like? Yeah, I don't know. Estevao is one of these players that he's very similar to the Conte Sour deal that I talked about 2 days ago, 3 days ago. I think he's going to be. I think Estevao is going to be one of these players that I think Chelsea paid about 30 million for him. I don't know what he's valued at now, but he's going to be someone that like there's deals being done behind the scenes that used to be no, it used to happen. It used to happen that Estevao or say players got bought by maybe Portuguese teams or some teams in La Liga, and then they became incredibly expensive for Premier League teams. So Estevao is one example that might be on up there. But so you think he's overrated? I think he's good. I think he's a decent player. I think it's definitely too early to say how good he's going to be. But if you can get him for 30 million rather than actually seeing him play okay for one season and then be forced to pay 50 or 60, I think it's actually quite a good deal there. So again, I think United are looking at some of those deals for the future. But no, João Pedro is the one that I would look at in terms of like yeah, he. Did they sign him from Brighton? It was Brighton, wasn't it? Was it like 50 million, 55? I can't remember how much he cost, but yeah, I think João Pedro was probably one of the better signings. Like if you compare like João Pedro with Gittins, for example, I think João Pedro is actually he's carried Chelsea at points this season, and I think he wasn't playing the last couple of games. Chelsea get 0 goals, not really a surprise. Um, so is Cunha the benchmark for you? So at the moment, I've got the poll running at 68%. How long do people want this poll to run for? I mean, I've forgotten where João Pedro played originally, but again, I think some of these it's maybe surprising that Chelsea didn't get him from Watford then, because that's something that you would see them doing that. Um, yeah, I like Cunha. Again, he's one of these players. I think sometimes with I don't watch every single league. So when people were talking about Lamans, I wouldn't claim to watch him, but I would watch a lot of Premier League, and I would say that when you're looking at the quality of players in the Premier League, I think Cunha stood out at at Wolves. He was like the best player by a distance. So no, absolutely no brainer for him. So Liam Delap reminds you of Kevin Davis. Okay, interestingly. So not many of us admit when we were on the wrong when we were wrong, Chris. So I wanted Sancho. I said that I thought Delap might be a decent value signing for 30 million, just because if you sign Delap for 30 million and it doesn't work out, you haven't lost loads of money. So I thought it was like a low risk signing. I didn't know what Delap would do. So I think it's just one of those. I think Chelsea got unlucky, to be honest. But no, I think he got a bit unlucky. I'm trying to think what players I wanted. I wanted Mbeumo and Cunha. To be honest, last season I would have taken Belieber at the end of the season. I think Belieber last summer I was saying get that deal done because Man United needed a midfielder. So I would say that I would have taken Belieber last season 100%. This season I prefer to go for in a different direction, but we'll have to see what happens with that one. Yeah, Lamans is still the best signing though. Absolutely. Pedro was at Brighton, but did he go to Brighton from Watford? I think is what people are saying. I'll admit it. Actually, I wasn't sure about Michael Elise. When Michael Elise moved, and we were kind of linked to him, I thought it was okay, but I think he's just. I think he surprised me by how much he improved. So again, no one knows for sure, do they? Like no one knows how much players are going to improve. I mean, say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I thought Ganacho had some improvement in him, but yeah. Mark said surprised we didn't sign a midfielder in January. I was actually surprised that we didn't go for like a João Gomez. It might have been, I think what happened with João Gomez is that because Wolves sold, who did Wolves sell? I can't remember the name of the, like, they sold the player to Crystal Palace, didn't they, for about 45 million. I think when you saw this, I think when you saw Wolves in January, they sold one player and then they weren't going to sell Gomez. So they knew they were going to get relegated. So I'm not really sure why they didn't. So, but again, BOQ Danny B, yeah, there is definitely is like to go back to Van der Ven. 68% of people would sign him. Is anybody worried about his injury issue? Is anybody worried? Yeah, I kind of annoyed a Chelsea fan yesterday by mentioning Garnacho. They told me they were going to sell Garnacho for a profit. So very confident, very confident Chelsea fan thinks they're going to flip Garnacho and make some money. It's not going to happen, but it's funny that they think that. I mean, who's going to pay like 45 to 50 million for Garnacho based on this season? Then I don't know who would. Can't think of a single team in world football that's that badly run. Um, I remember when some channels were saying Delap was a new Rooney. Oh right, okay. I think there's opinions and there's that. What is that? That if a fan channel like say I'm getting it must be like like it must be like an under the radar channel surely. Like who would say that Delap is a new Wayne Rooney on the basis of what? On the like we played against Delap and I can't remember him doing much at all. Like there was definitely like something there, and you thought that he could develop. But Wayne Rooney was like you. Wayne Rooney, like you get him out of the box at a 16-year-old, and he was unbelievable. Like that. Wayne Rooney's debut for Manchester United was a European hat trick. So yeah, there's like levels to this game. But if you find that clip, I'd be just like laughing. The clip I saw about Delap that made me laugh, and I will send it to a few people that I know was that they were comparing to Delap as saying he was like Haaland, but like more physical than Haaland. And I was just that, and they were saying, so it made me laugh. I couldn't watch it with a straight face, but it's so good. Um, saying Rasmus is twice the player. Yeah, they mentioned Rasmus as well. It's brilliant video. Okay. Evan Ferguson, I think, is a different issue. Like that's an injury issue. for sure. So I think there's different factors in this one. So shall I close the poll on Van der Ven and see what the result is? Anyone that's just joined, please vote on Van der Ven. It's still surprisingly positive what people want in the chat, which is interesting to see. I think next time what's going to be more interesting is if there's more players linked, maybe what we should be looking at is which is the best option, and it might be like if you look, so if you're just watching now, if you think Manchester United should sign a centre back, just put in the centre back you think we should be looking at, the centre back. Then I will just say with like people on YouTube and Twitter that if I don't watch a player play, I'm not going to say too much about him. I'll just give you the information I read and say that's the information I read. If I do see a player play, then I was quite vocal about Mbeumo last season as a upgrade on the players we had last season, and I was quite vocal on. Certainly when it came to Cunha, I was pretty happy with this one. But Jermaine Defoe, are you talking about Jermaine Defoe like years ago? Jermaine Defoe is actually one of these players where, if you look at his career, people forget how many goals Jermaine Defoe scored, and I think he just scored goals like throughout wherever he was. Mark's gone from Murillo, and Murillo or Slotterbeck would be my choice. I think does Slotterbeck have like a situation where he's renewed his contract, but he might be available for like 35, 40-ish? Like, because I think Van Hecker is actually worth about the same sort of amount as well. Something along those sort of points. Um, why did Welbeck fail at Manchester United? I think Welbeck had a combination of did have like a couple of injuries, and then his strike rate wasn't particularly great. And I honestly, I can't remember who was in the team at the same time. But no, there's various reasons, isn't there, why Welbeck got moved on. At the time, there wasn't loads of outrage, but he's had a very good season. But even like 12 months ago, people were actually questioning whether he'd even be a good option as a backup. So people do change their minds, which is fine. I think nobody expected Dominic Calvert-Lewin to have the season he's done after what he had done at Everton. And we looked at Dominic Calvert-Lewin's record for goals, injuries, etc. And he's had a good season, and he's one of the reasons why Leeds beat us, and he's one of the reasons why Leeds are staying in the Premier League. So it is difficult. I got it wrong with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's actually had a decent season. I think with Welbeck, then I think Man United sold him a bit too cheap. So but yeah, good to see you, Jeff, and welcome to the chat. So same played Welbeck at position, Louis van Gaal. We probably had a situation of say a few years ago where the managers had a little bit more say, and there's some players got moved on because the managers didn't rate them. There may be a different situation now where when we saw Ruben Amorim not really rating Kobe Mainoo, that caused a problem at the club, and you could see that. I remember talking about this months ago, and so what? Louis van Gaal stopped us signing Tony Cruz. Oh no, there's stories in there about certain players that were vetoed by managers, and I think that's why when you've got a manager that their job is to train the team and to organize the squad, etc. You kind of need people with a different skill set, maybe that are doing the scouting. But I remember like that apparently Ruben Am no, who is it? I think apparently who's the manager I've forgotten. Eric Ten Hag pushed to get Anana apparently, and we scouted a different goalkeeper, and then the goalkeeping scouts pushed Lamans as an option. They wanted him, and we went for that option. So I think we've been recommended quite good players by the scouts, and sometimes our decision making has been quite poor because these players like may have been actually wanted by the club and the scouts, but the managers, head coaches maybe they've had too much say, and that could be a factor. Let's say, in your opinion, that he's not a good striker and shouldn't start over Sesko. So great on the wing. I would say that it depends on the match. Like when Manchester United are playing against certain teams, and Benjamin Sesko is maybe not getting involved in the game. I think if you want to organise the team a little bit like we did, say early on in the season, say against Arsenal, for example, if you're looking at that game and certain games like that, where if Manchester United are going to be largely defending, then I think there's an opportunity. I think there are some games where Benjamin Sesko might be better to come off the bench towards the end of the season, but I think with Mbeumo, it's probably he's lost a bit of form, but Mbeumo does actually he is good in a defensive situation, and he is actually quite good at then running and pressing defence. But I think Mbeumo is in our starting 11, but I think United need to find a way of getting Benjamin Sesko in our starting 11 as well. And from next season, I think that's going to be the case. So looking at the Van der Ven, I think did I read out the result of this poll? So I'm trying to find the comments, but the result was like 68% wanted Van der Ven, so it's quite high. I know there's like a couple of points, like a few people look at Van der Ven and say injury prone is a bit of a concern for you, which it's fair. I think there's people can have different views. But Jeff says I want Van der Ven. I think he would work well here. Seems to be sturdy, good in the air, and as well he brings the ball out well, breaking lines as well. So that's kind of the positives, isn't it? If you look at the positives, then there's positives there to find. If you're looking at weaknesses, you're going to find weaknesses in every single player. I think people look at Senesi and question, like, I think, is it Senesi that's actually quite bad in the air? That maybe it's like 50-50 about aerial duels, where Maguire would be extremely dominant in that regards. And if you're looking at Van der Ven, I'm not sure what Van der Ven's aerial duel rate is, but again, every single player we look at is going to have some strengths and weaknesses. It's probably about looking at who's going to pair well with what we've got. Lots of people today are talking about Lacroix as like an option over Van der Ven. Um, I think loads of people talk about Murillo, and then they think that with him, he might be very expensive, very, very expensive. Yeah, uh, my view is I'm not sure about Van der Ven. When I've watched Spurs, I might have watched bad games, and if I spoke to some Spurs fans, that might be the best. That might be the best thing to do to try and find out what they think. Because when I watch Van der Ven play, I see that as attacking wise, and actually, I've seen him like break into the box and like finish chances and score goals. But I mean, he's a defender. And then I've seen in the very same game, I've seen him caught out and make some like lapses in defence and cost them goals. So I've seen the best and worst of Van der Ven, and I'm just wondering, do Manchester United think that this player will also like forget what level he is now? Is he going to be a player that in a couple of years' time, 2 or 3 years' time, is going to actually iron out some of those and gradually get better and better? So I think that's something that you could look at is that the players we're signing, Van der Ven's not like 35, is he? So Van der Ven's still going to, it's got improvements. And I would say centre backs, you probably peak a bit later in your career. You gradually get, I think with centre backs, it's definitely understanding the game is something which takes a bit of time. And I wouldn't be surprised that if you sign a player that's 25, 26, I think they can also make significant improvements in what they're doing. Yeah, Lacroix seems to be like a channel favourite at the moment. It seems that how much everybody that's mentioning this player, how much would he cost? Like, if anybody knows his contract situation, knows how much he would cost, then that's going to be something to. Yeah, I think everybody thinks that Van der Ven might be quite expensive, and everybody's kind of secretly hoping that they get relegated, and then we get maybe quite a good deal. Um, so following Slotterbeck's contract extension, which was recent, so I was right, there was actually this month. Nicholas Slotterbeck has a unique dream club release clause in his deal with Borussia Dortmund. It's valid until the World Cup finishes. It's around about 50 million. Do you remember when there was a I can't remember which player it was. It might have been Benjamin Sesko actually, and it might have been with Benjamin Sesko. And I'm trying to think if it's another player as well. I think there was actually a clause in his contract that said he would be available to special clubs was the term. Okay, so they said special clubs, and it meant probably like you got the Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and I think Manchester United might be on that list. So I think with like this one, that by special clubs, I wonder if it's like specific with like certain clubs, but if he's got a unique dream club, then I wonder whether how does that clause work? Does he have to list the dream clubs and go, actually, I dream of playing for Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid, Barcelona? Is that how that works? Is that your dream? I dream for playing like for one of these 20 clubs. Or is it a club in the Champions League? There might be something along those lines. That Champions League, clause is somewhat a bit easier to put in the contract. But no, it'd be really interesting to see that contract, wouldn't it, at some point? Cheers, Gregory. So I heard Van der Ven has missed over 400 days through injuries in the last 4 years. So that's a concern as hamstrings, they normally reoccur. Yeah, people that are keen, and I know Danny B's in the chat, people that were keen don't seem to be put off by that. So Danny says, I think Van der Ven ends up at Liverpool. You don't like his attitude, and you think he's overhyped. So it's divisive, isn't it? Very divisive with this one. Weirdly, though, the poll was like largely positive. So, I mean, I'm quite open-minded. So you'll have injury issues with Van der Ven in the future, rapid, but those hamstrings break down a lot. So everybody's saying the same sort of thing. Um, a big shot mentality, says Genghis. Maybe I need to look into Van der Ven a bit more because I just see him as a player that when I've watched him, I just see a player that's got some, he's got some attributes, but I think he's still got to work on his game. I don't think he's there yet. I think he's like, forget about any sort of injury issues. I think he still, for me, feels a bit error prone in some games. It could be that Spurs are playing very badly, and it could be a problem, but so yeah, there's lots of good centre backs out there. I'm not married to him either, Jeff. I think there's other options out there. 100%. We need to have a look at it. So Dorgu left back is. We'll have to talk about that at some point, Mark, but possibly. So what's my thoughts on Senesi? So thanks for joining the channel. Thanks for getting involved. My thoughts on Senesi are. I think somebody pointed it out to me, and then I looked into it, and he's actually quite bad in the air. But in terms of Senesi, he wants about 100k a week. I think that's what is it about 100k a week, somebody said? Or he's been offered about 60k a week by Spurs. I think that's the story. And I think Senesi would be maybe a good, like, average Premier League player. I don't think he's going to be the levels of like the top players, but I do think if you're looking for somebody that's going to be there or thereabouts for a bit of experience, and particularly as I keep saying, that I think United are looking at hopefully having Lenny Yoro and Aiden Heaven as like that. This is what Manchester United probably see in 2 years' time. They probably go, right, 2 years' time, Aiden Heaven and Yoro, they're playing most games. What do we do before then? And are we going to go for someone like Van der Ven, who's going to come in, be first choice ahead of those players, maybe for a couple of seasons, and then it's like, then he'll be taking on the Maguire role where maybe he won't play quite so many games, but also he might improve. We might end up with like some good centre back options. But I think with Senesi, he's not good in the air. That's something that I think he doesn't win. It's like 50-50 duels. So I don't think he's great in the air. And I think a few people, maybe Woods are better in the chat, posted that a week ago. So I think that he's not good in the air. But he is quite reliable. He would be certainly a decent player for a bit of time. But again, I think it's like you pay your money, and if you pay more, you're going to get someone better. Senesi is available on a free. He's going to be not incredibly huge salary demand. I don't mind it too much, but it doesn't make me excited about the deal. But I think it's like if we run out of money, I think it's a cheap option, like a cheap option. Welcome, Sean, to the chat. United West, everybody. Yeah, it's a cheap option, isn't it? So it's like it's a Senesi's a cheap option. I think Van Hecker's like how much is he going to cost? Is he about 35 million? So let me have a look at the comments. I thought Van Hecker was about 35 to 40 million, possibly. If he's on the last year of his contract, that could be a good one. The feedback I get from, say Forest, in terms of like Forest fans, season ticket holders, is they value Murillo very highly. So I'm assuming Forest stay in the Premier League. I'm assuming that he's going to be too expensive. So kind of like putting two and two together. Um, so between the three relegation clubs, any centre backs besides Van der Ven we could get for that look good value for money. I'm just thinking. I think Wolves are going to be pillaged. I don't know too much about. I think Burnley are the team I watched the least, so I wouldn't say too much about Burnley. I think with like West Ham, I don't know. People talked about West Ham centre backs, but I don't think West Ham have been. Well, they are actually playing better, a lot better recently, but it is difficult to say. So can we discuss can we relegate a third side and that will benefit us? No, I said that personally. I would rather see West Ham stay up, but I would also look at West Ham as having two players I wouldn't mind buying. So yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a contradiction there, isn't it? I think football fans seem to be really wanting to go for like, Spurs going down. That seems to be the key. Cheers, Bilal. Cheers, Bilal. If you want eight players in, you better if you count players that are signed for like 1 million that are maybe going to go into the academy, then you might be okay, Genghis. But if you're looking beyond that, I think you're looking at maybe four serious signings that are big money, and then some slightly cheaper options. So yeah, apparently Real Madrid and Liverpool are on Slotterbeck's list, and Bayern are excluded to prevent. Okay, that's interesting. There seems to be something definitely in German clubs recently that they're really trying to stop Bayern Munich buying all their players because I suppose that's sensible because if you look at it, then I think Bayern Munich bought Lewandowski from a rival. I'm trying to think who else they bought. They bought, but there's a long list of players that Bayern Munich have bought from other German clubs, and they regularly do it. They wanted to get Wirtz, didn't they? And it makes sense. Can you imagine if Manchester City wanted to buy Bruno Fernandes a couple of years ago, and they bought Declan Rice and they bought Caicedo? It would be that the Premier League would largely become pretty much pointless, wouldn't it? So it's probably good for German clubs to actually try and make it. It's probably better for the league, to be honest. If you're looking at that one, if you're looking at trying to improve the German league as a spectacle, I think the dominance by Munich probably isn't a good thing. And let me see this quote from Ben Jacobs on the United stand. Let's see what Ben Jacobs is saying. That's quite succinct for Ben Jacobs. So United want to decide on a manager by late April, early May. So just looking at the count. So we've got like a between 1 to 2 weeks, I guess, for that one. So in a week's time, hopefully, we're going to start seeing some serious news. I'd say likely after securing Champions League football, Carrick is the front runner, but the club will still assess other candidates. I think it's sensible to consider other candidates, but probably make the decision when you start going into May, make the decision then, and then But one of the things I think is going to be like it feels a little bit like we're kicking things off a bit earlier this season, but we still got a few games to play. And I think some clubs are trying to they're trying to wait until that things are decided. Like there's a few things to decide, isn't there? Still in the Premier League season, one is going to be who's got Champions League football. Like that needs to be decided first. Like that's going to be an impact on which head coach might be interested, which players might be interested. But the big thing I think it also is going to be who gets relegated. What release clauses have they got for their players? Like G, Fernandez, Van der Ven, other players that people have been talking about. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's very, very succinct. I mean, I think Ben Jacobs is effectively telling us that Manchester United will decide on a head coach at some point. So, no, Ben Jacobs has got a job to do. I don't find he always gives me. If I want to talk about a story, then I don't think Ben Jacobs is going to be bringing me something that Laurie Whitwell hasn't already got there and Andy Mitton haven't already got there. So we'll see. We will see. And yeah, World Cup coming up. So we kind of need to move rapidly, don't we? There was I suppose that makes me think like that a lot like Manchester United seem to have distanced themselves a little bit from Tonali, but Tonali doesn't have a World Cup coming up, does he? So I think Tonali's the one player that isn't going to play in the World Cup. So you'd feel like if you're going to get a deal done, maybe that would be one. When am I calling Ben the channel? I don't know. I saw Ben Jacobs on a small channel once. I think Ben. I remember. I know somebody that got Fabrizio on their channel about actually it might have been about 3 to 4 years ago. And at the time their channel was maybe like about 1K, I think. But I think Fabrizio went on, but Fabrizio charges like a load of money for about 30 minutes. And effectively he'll just tell you what you can see on his YouTube channel. So I don't know if there's any value in that, whether if you ask Fabrizio a direct question, would you get a direct answer, and would you pay him any money for that? And I don't think it's worth it. I mean, I have no idea what happens on other channels, but I don't think Ben Jacobs is going to tell you something that you can't read somewhere else. And I don't know. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on that. That it would be quite good to get if you can get journalists that maybe have a what's the word? A journalist that maybe put out less information and journalists that maybe have different sources rather than get a bit over. Some journalists are out there so much doing all this content everywhere that they'll just end up repeating themselves and they'll end up saying things that you can already find out. So I think it's like I think you have to just be mindful that if you did get him on, what value would it be? I suppose is what I'm trying to say. So have we got a couple of questions? I think should we stay live for like till like another 10 minutes? If people got some questions, like we can do 10 minutes. So is it so it's going to be more enjoyable to watch the results of this slow motion train wreck by Spurs. I think there's a generation of Spurs fans and a generation of football fans that have never seen Spurs get relegated that are looking with interest in like what sort of contracts have Spurs put into the contract. Have they got release clauses in the contracts? Cheers, Jeff. Appreciate that. Thanks for getting involved, and also please share the stream if you can. Always really really helps. Can you imagine a situation where the Van der Ven's been talked about now? It's not, even if Manchester United wanted to sign him, which seems to be 50-50 with fans, and actually, even though I did a poll in the chat, it was still actually like 60, I think 68% people voted for that one. So do another hour, another hour you sat at the airport. I don't know, maybe I can't do another hour. My voice will just fail at some point. But if people want to continue the stream a little bit more, please just put some comments and questions in, and I can go a bit longer if there's comments and questions and people have got things to discuss. But if I kind of hit the wall, kind of voice wise and content wise, I will wrap up and revisit topics tomorrow. Sorry, tonight. But yeah, please, if you are new to the channel as well, I'm not sure what we're doing with subscriber count, but I think we hit 600 so far, so we're going to push on for like 700 up to a K as rapidly as possible. And yes, if you've got some comments and questions over anything we talked about, then please feel free to get them in. I think Van der Ven, 68% of people watching said they'd like Manchester United to go for that deal. I think when we talk about what options you prefer, I think Slotterback comes up, but it's actually quite a difficult deal. A nice one. So thank you, people, for subscribing. A couple of subscribers away from 610. So gradually getting there. Do you think JJ Gabriel will get minutes next season? Same with Lacey. JJ Gabriel isn't allowed to play until a certain age, is he? There's a certain age in which JJ Gabriel can play Premier League football. So I don't know how much he can play next season. That's just beyond the club's control. I think it's got to be a certain age to play. So I think with Lacey, I think Lacey's got a chance to get some matches as well. I don't think I don't think yeah I don't think we're going to know too much regarding JJ Gabriel, but it's going to be yeah, JJ Gabriel's 2 months too late. So I think with JJ Gabriel, can you play towards the very end of the season? I think with what's weird about registrations is it's not exactly when your age is, but there's a couple of points during the year in which you can register to play, and I think that JJ Gabriel, just the combination of when he's born and his age, means that it's going to be a little bit of time, isn't it? So you say no, it was 68%. 68% of people wanted to get a Van der Ven. Berber's one of the people who wanted to get Van der Ven. And Chris wanted to get Van der Ven as well. So there's people in the comments that did want to get him. So it's just about a different judgment call, isn't it? So anyone that we get to linked will divide. And so Lacroix is like a good shout actually. And how much would he cost is probably, how much would he cost? He's definitely performed quite well this season. And Van Hecker, I do quite like as well. That he's a player that I've noticed a bit more recently, and looking at him because of looking at sort of centre backs people have been talking about. I think did he get an assist? He got an assist, or maybe it's chalked. I think he got one assist, or maybe it's chalked down or off. But he's another option, potentially sensible priced. Academy players close to making the first team squad, then that's really difficult. That's really difficult. I was actually on grass earlier today, Gregory. I did actually go outside because it's quite sunny. I was doing something outside, so I was outside earlier on. But you hope Van de Ven goes to Liverpool, Genghis. You must be one of those people that's hoping there's going to be like some potential hamstring issues as well. Apparently, breaking news: Van de Ven would choose Liverpool over Manchester United if Spurs go down, as he and his family are Liverpool fans. So, maybe what happens if maybe what if Liverpool don't want him, and what if Liverpool have got other options? So, I mean, if he wants to be a Liverpool fan, that's kind of making me slightly at least 5% less keen on this deal already. But I think this we had this conversation with was it Gyökeres? Is Gyökeres an Arsenal fan? Is that a true story? And there was a player we were linked to. I can't remember. I'm going to guess it might be Hjulmand, but there was a player we were linked to that apparently had an Arsenal tattoo. I mean, my guess is Hjulmand, but I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it might have been a Sporting Lisbon player. And I was thinking, if you've got an Arsenal tattoo, you're gonna have to laser that off if you want to join another club. But yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was thinking that's what I thought, Danny. I was thinking that I was put off by Hillman for other reasons, but when I heard about the Arsenal tattoo, I was like, I'm if that is true, I think it is factually true, isn't it? I think people looked at that. I think that's a strange one, isn't it? So the August 31 rule under Premier League, say, well, L22, a player must be at least 15 years old by 31st of August of the current season to be eligible for a matchday squad, and he is 16 next October the 6th. This feels a bit like when you're going to school, doesn't it? And it feels like is it a weird coincidence? Is that actually the same age regarding like which school year you start in? So maybe that's it. Because in the UK, if you're born on like the 31st, then you're part of one school year. If you're born on the 1st of September, you're part of the next school year. One of my cousins was born on the 1st of September, so he's literally is he the oldest person in his year? Yeah, he's the oldest person in his year. But if he was born a day earlier, he'd have been the youngest person and gone up a year earlier. But yes, that's the rule with JJ Gabriel. It's just unfortunately going to hold him a little bit, hold him a little bit back. But also, JJ Gabriel might be one that's going to be, yeah, very, yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult with how you manage his future as well, because there's definitely going to be a few clubs looking at trying to do that one. I think Giggs started when did Giggs start when he was about 17? I think it was like 17, 18, but it was a bit different then because United actually had, I think it might be 1990 he made his debut or something like that. But I think United did have a lot more experience in the team at that point. I think JJ Gabriel's got he needs a bit more yeah, he needs a bit more time before he's ready as well. At 17, yeah, I was thinking like something like that with Giggs. Giggs looked quality at that age to be honest. That he had a lot of the ability. I remember seeing him about that age, and it was like good finishing, very strong runner with the ball. To be honest, Giggs never really got physically big, did he? Like Giggs never really when people come through and people say you need to bulk up, Giggs never really bulked up. He was still pretty lean. So I don't think you necessarily need to bulk up, but Giggs played in a more physical environment. Yeah, Giggs is like me, like quite lean, but fairly, fairly-ish, strongish. I used to be, but no, I think Giggs was Giggs didn't really take contact, did he? So Giggs isn't going to be. People actually, Giggs is a bit like Messi with the running and the balance. That Giggs would just run past people and they couldn't really do much about it. So it wasn't that people were going to be able to flatten Giggs; they just couldn't get near him. It's a bit like George Best. You can try and kick him, but he's probably just going to get past you anyway and make you look stupid. So no, that's where I think when you look at players coming for the academy, it's honestly difficult to predict which one's going to be making it. And I think what you can do is you can probably pick 4 or 5 players and go, actually, they might be ready for the first team, and then see how they do. So on the basis of that, like we saw that Curry Mainoo, when he played from the first couple of games from the academy, you could look at him and go, actually, he's ready. Marcus Rashford, when he made his debut, he was ready. He made an impact. Whereas like Forson comes on, doesn't look good. If you remember Hannibal, he came on, probably should have been sent off. So there has been a mix where some players come on for their debut and they kind of look a bit out of their depth. So it's very, very difficult. That's why I'd always say, give a player like 5 minutes or something to start with, depending on how you think they're going to do. And I think you just have to look at it in like a case by case. Like just give them a very small amount of time, and then see how they do. Because I think sometimes it's a bit unpredictable how an academy player is going to take to the first team as well. And so I heard this as well that Cristiano Ronaldo's son might be lining up in the same team as Cristiano Ronaldo. Is Ronaldo 41? Is that how old Ronaldo is? He must have had children fairly young, I'm guessing, like, relatively speaking. But I remember LeBron James did the same for the Lakers, didn't he? LeBron James is playing with his son. It's absolutely insane that if you're looking at LeBron James, you're looking at is it, what's bizarre is that do you find like you're looking at it's almost like now because if you grew up in the 90s and watched the players in the 90s, it's like they're children now that when you see Old Trafford and you see Man United celebrating trophies and you see those children coming on the pitch, like Wayne Rooney's child, or you have I'm trying to think who else has been there. That I think Kluivert's son because he plays for Bournemouth. You see that you're starting to see the next generation of players come through. That it's quite rare, but you see players that come through with like their dads. So I have no idea if Cristiano Ronaldo's son's any good. I mean, his dad was like world class, but I don't know. Is Cristiano Ronaldo's son gonna have to like play against Messi's son? Is that how that I saw that and it made me think like Casper Schmeichel, like Casper Schmeichel. You remember seeing him as a child and like Fletcher's children as well. There's like loads of examples, isn't there, of like players that we saw. I think the ones that didn't work out, like Beckham's son, obviously just didn't have the ability. I think Beckham was someone that kind of forced his way into greatness by his work ethic, and that's something that is going to be very difficult to replicate. But I think Wayne Rooney's son is like potentially one. I think Fletcher's sons are ones that like one got their debut this year, didn't they? So yeah, there's quite a few. There's quite a few others to see as well. Is it nepotism? Well, I think if it depends. It depends, doesn't it? Like a lot of people say Kluivert's done pretty well, but I think otherwise, yeah, it's good. No, it's for me, it's like very different, isn't it? If you're looking at Lenny Yoro, then it feels like Lenny Yoro might need a bit more physicality about him or have a more physical partner alongside him because Lenny Yoro looks like he struggles a little bit competing. And I think with David De Gea looked like he struggled a little bit initially. Lamon seems fine though. I don't think it's necessarily size. I think it's strength. That I think that's what you're looking at. So that I think genetically everybody's different. I think with some people you can build up strength without getting bulk. Like someone like Adama Traore is a massive unit. I don't know how strong he is, but he just looks big. Whereas some people like Roy Keane didn't have a massive build, but it was pretty tough. And I think some players actually like if you ever met Brian Robson in real life, I know somebody that met Brian Robson and he was saying that quite small player, but again it's about physical presence. I don't think Mark Hughes was massive, but yeah. So Yoris should go to the gym. Some of the things is like for some players, I think if Ryan Giggs bulked up, he might lose some of what he brings to the table. Like I think Ryan Giggs had this speed of movement, this the balance like finely poised. I don't think you could actually look at it and say that I don't think that like for Yoro, that saying Yoro's quite bulky. I think with Yoro, there must be something else. Like there must be something regarding when you look at Maguire. There's something that I think Yoro needs to work on certain things. Maybe it's positionally, maybe it's how he gets into the duels. There's going to be something there. I think he needs to work on. Whereas Aiden Heaven, I think he's got an advantage that is a lot bigger. It's yeah, but I think Adama Traore is probably one of those examples that is almost like too big for football. I don't think he that regularly plays 90 minutes, does he? He used to be more of an impact player for Wolves, but he's so ridiculous that I think it doesn't mean he's actually more effective, does it? But I'm going to be live for like another 5 minutes, guys, just to wrap it up on that 2 mark because we're trying to rebuild the channel. we're just doing longer streams, but we will be cutting back the length of streams because it's not sustainable to do like multiple long hour streams every single day. Yeah, Heavens is solid, really, really solid. Um, Adama Traore claims that he doesn't go to the gym, but you think that sort of muscle just doesn't like magically appear on you. That yeah, it doesn't magically appear to you. I think with Yoro, I think he's like naturally lean build. I don't think he can. I don't think you can put. I don't think Yoro would put on loads of muscle. If you look at somebody like Benjamin Sesko, he looks pretty tall. He's not like he's not like Peter Crouch. He has got more to him, but I think he's like deceptively strong, and I think he uses his like um. I think he uses his body more effectively than Rasmus did because Rasmus wasn't small, but he seemed to just be maybe it's bad positionally or bad like kind of how he approaches things. I can't really put my finger on it, but there's something not quite amazing. So Adama Traore should play rugby league. I'm not sure if Adama Traore's like got the elite kind of like stamina. I think for me, Adama Traore was a little bit like I know people would love San Maximum, but did San Maximum actually do that much? Like if you look at San Maximum's career, was there any output? I remember actually talking about Sam Maximin's output and saying it was like a dormitory, and then he scored a great goal against us. But if you looked over the whole season, like Dan James has more end product than both those players. Like uh, and Dan James was a cheap player. No one really rated him loads, but his end product was actually more than those two players. That's what I'm thinking. I saw the comments he was about going to the gym. He said he didn't go to the gym. That's what he said. Just like bodyweight exercise or something, but he's just like yeah, it's like he's too big for football. But okay, let's go back to so a couple of minutes left. Final comments, people. So I remember him having a good season, but Sam Maximum, yeah, bit flashy with Sam Maximum. Sam Maximum's one of those players that I think YouTube loves because you can get a compilation videos and people go, "Oh, what a baller he is," and then you go, "What did he do? Did he get any assists? Did he score any goals? No." So I think it's almost like if people describe a player as a baller and you go, right, what's he good at? And then if they can't answer you, I think it tells you what you need to know. If somebody says, like, why do I like Bruno? I'd say he's got one of the most creative range of passing I've ever seen in terms of like creating good goal scoring opportunities in a match. I don't think that there's anyone that matches Bruno Fernandes at the moment in world football. Bruno doesn't have the legs, but that's not what it. If you put Bruno in a far up the pitch position, yeah, I don't think you get much um, wrong with Bruno. I think that if someone has a player they can't describe, you think, well, what's good about what's good about Sam Maximum? What was he effective at? Would Sam Maximum fit in our team now? That so you watched Bournemouth against Leeds. Alex Scott looked average. I think it's one game. I think Alex Scott is no, on one game. Like I'll say the exact opposite and say Belieber played a very good game against Chelsea, but it's still one game, isn't it? Yeah, it's like one game. So you think Euro might have done too much gym work and bulked up too soon? It could be. It could be that with some like I've seen examples in other sport when people try and bulk up too much. Like I think Jason Robinson maybe bulked up too much when he was an England rugby player. I think you can bulk up too much and you can sacrifice some things for getting too bulky. I think it depends on the sport. I think with football, the difference is going to be if I hammered the weights all day, every day, I would just get stronger. That I'm genetically not going to put on big size. I think Adama Traore, if he did serious weights, he would just be like a bodybuilder. But so I think he's got a different issue. I think Maguire's just naturally pretty big, and I think Aiden Heaven is actually naturally pretty big as well. So I think he's or pretty strong. Is maybe a better way of putting it. I think Lukaku maybe bulked up a little bit too much, but I think he was. But maybe it might be also. It might not be intentional. It might be that Lukaku was just quite big naturally as well. So say there is a difference between the thin player now in Gabriel and say Gabriel's 15. So I think it's really difficult to pick out. Like if we all had photos of ourselves at 15 and looked at ourselves when we were 20, then there's going to be a lot of things happening. You're going to be quite a different person, like size wise and genetics wise. And I think I remember do you remember the who's the basketball player that played for the Bulls? Dennis Rodman. He said he grew like half a foot in a year or 8 inches in a year. He grew loads in like one summer and went from being like average height child to suddenly being way big. Um, so Berber had abs at 16. What happened? What happened? I've never seen what you look like, but from what you're saying, you're implying that it's things have changed. But we're not elite athletes, so we don't need to be in shape. That's fine. That we don't need to be in top physical condition. It's probably good for you. Like I would say, as a recommendation, it's probably good to stay healthy because you're going to benefit it from it more than anybody else. But we're not running around the pitch for 90 minutes. And I think if you are running around the pitch for 90 minutes, you should put more effort into your health. Say Mike saying controlled aggression is required and it's timing in the air for Yoro. I think sometimes it is like Maguire can pin people in a way that I don't think Yoro's got the skill set, but it is a bit of it's something to get used to. I think in the Premier League you're going to get challenged, and in the Premier League I think Yoro's finding out that you're going to have a lot of good strikers that deal with that aerial threat. You need to try and do that. If Yoro can get that part of his game, and he can, if he can get the sort of skill set that Maguire's got, I think they're different. He'll never be quite as good as Maguire was in the air. I think that would be, yeah, a big box check for Yoro. I think it would be a big improvement in his career. So, and that's what I'm thinking with Yoro. I think there's improvements to be made as well. As well. No, I've heard it's overrated. That you just it's difficult, isn't it? When you get quite hungry, and when people start talking about food, uh, so Jordan bulked up in the NBA, but it can affect things as well. I think with NBA players, they all bulk up, don't they? They all bulk up, and it can affect your game because I think when you're looking at a player that's say like JJ Gabriel, people will look at his running, look at his close control, and he will have like growth spurts and things will change as well. And when people were looking at Kobe Mainu and looking at every player that's going to be 16, 17, 18, I think you need to like forget what they look like now because players are going to be they're not haven't actually finished growing. I think that maybe you could hit the weights a bit too soon, and you could pick up injuries trying to do too much too soon because you just need to actually just be patient with this. Like, yeah, when it gets his man strength, I like that. When it gets his man strength, he'll be okay. Yeah, it's something that you don't have to work on. You will get there, but like it doesn't happen when you're 16, 17, 18. It will just kick him, won't it? And it's about consistency. He will get stronger, but he won't have to get bulkier. That's the thing. You will just get stronger. So I think with Euro, bit of patience. That and again, that kind of like loops around quite nicely to what we started off with. Is that Manchester United need to be somewhat patient with these two guys because they could be the future. And if they are the future, we kind of need to make sure that they're not kind of forced into like heavy training, loads and loads of games. Like experience will happen naturally, and I don't think we need to worry too much about that. But I kind of like that get his man strength. So when these two guys, I think if Aiden Heaven gets his man strength, it's like game over for like some of the strikers because he's going to be a bit of a beast. But I'm going to head off. There will be a live tonight. I think it might be about 8 p.m., possibly slightly earlier. If you're in the Discord, there's social links as well because YouTube doesn't really send out recommendations, I've heard. So you probably don't get recommendations, you probably don't get notifications. But if you're in the socials, it will be about 7 to 8 p.m. start, generally in an evening. There's probably a solo stream tonight, but I will be working on getting back some of the guests that have been on as well. And that'll be something that we can be doing. Yeah, big up to you, Chris and Mark, Genghis, Coyote. Who else is there? Rob, Gregory, and Sean as well. I'm quite bad at remembering who I did earlier on, but Berber, can't forget you guys. Danny B, and all you legends that have got great opinions. Even like Mr. Cake had some good opinions that I was agreeing with today. Everybody's got some different views, and I think we're probably going to agree on one thing. We want to make sure we get a good transfer window. Enjoy your day, guys. We'll hopefully see you a bit later, but if not, we'll be live tomorrow as well. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing if you're new. And if you're able to share it with people you know, I appreciate that. Also, thanks, Mike, as well. Mark, if I mention your names, it's difficult to remember everyone's name, but yeah, involved in the Discord if you want to be kept up to date, the Facebook group if you just want notifications as well. And see you guys in this evening if you want to talk about some transfer news. We'll be looking to see what's trending tonight, and we'll greet you in about maybe about 4 to 5 hours time. So take it easy, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one.